Alright, so I just got done watching UFC 313, and, well, Magomed Ankalaev got the win over Alex Pereira by 48-47 decision. And honestly, I think this was the worst possible outcome that could have happened. But before I get into why I think that's the case, here are my overall thoughts on the card. I think, as a card, it was alright. I give it like a 6.5 out of 10, maybe a 7. And that's because it had some fantastic highlights, like Mauricio Ruffi's wheel kick KO against Bobby Green. Fantastic. Gaethje versus Fiziev. It was a great fight. I mean, it wasn't a fantastic fight. It wasn't like a barn burner, greatest fight of all time, but it was a good, solid Gaethje fight, right? And the only problem I have with that fight was that, Gaethje's probably going to be gifted a title shot against Makhachev next, knowing how the UFC rolls. Besides that, I laughed my ass off when Ignacio Bahamondes submitted Jalen Turner off his back. We'll be talking about that in depth later on, and my personal opinions on Jalen Turner as a fighter. And, of course, my countryman, Ray Syria, got absolutely cooked and destroyed and dominated. And you'll be able to get to watch Japanese Twitter cook Ray Syria for his loss later on in this video. Also, there was a WMMA fight at some point. I don't know where it was. I think it was on the main card, but I didn't watch it. But before we get to breaking down the individual fights, first I have to say that, 2 fights were canceled off this card the day of. One of those being Chris Gutierrez versus John Castaneda, and then the other one was Blades versus Kuniev because Blades got AIDS. So, please make sure to keep Curtis Blades in your prayers. And now, getting to the big deal, the main event, Ankalaev versus Pereira, and Ankalaev wins in, personally, what I think was the worst possible outcome. And that is Ankalaev by a controversial, relatively boring 48-47 decision. Now, Ankalaev, he knocked down Pereira in round 2. And I thought, oh my god, holy shit, Ankalaev is outstriking Alex Pereira. And then he went on to hold Pereira up against the cage in round 4 and 5. If Ankalaev had knocked out Alex Pereira in the second round, or at any point in the fight, I think I'd be perfectly fine with having Ankalaev as a champion. But instead, we're going to get 2 weeks of the same old, boring, drawn-out debate about cage control and about whether referees should separate clinching fighters against the cage, about how much grappling counts, these sorts of things. And it's going to be a bunch of coping poetards and gloating Dagestani/Muslim fans who are just being annoying. And it's just going to be another one of those 2 weeks, right? Because, and it's going to be 2 weeks because next week's card is Martin Vettori versus Roman Dolidze. So we're going to keep on talking about this particular decision. And it's just going to dominate MMA YouTube discourse. And I'm just tired of it. And that's why I'm saying it's the worst possible outcome. It's just, we've gone through this so many times, right? And ultimately, we all know that who you're choosing to side with in this debate about cage control and about control time, it doesn't come down to actual logic or reasoning. It just comes down to who you support as a fighter. If you're like a Dagestani fan / a Muslim fan, you're going to support rules that favor you and your fighters. If you're a Brazilian fan / a Western fan, or an MMA guru fan who is kind of defined by their opposition, by your opposition to the Dagestanis and their fans, you're going to choose rules that benefit your guys. So personally, I would just wish that we stop pretending that we're arguing from a place of reason or from logic and just admit that we're biased. But what I was saying is that I think that Alex Pereira 3-2, Ankalaev 3-2, and Ankalaev 4-1, all of those are honestly pretty valid scorecards in this case. Personally, I picked Alex Pereira, but I did not have Pereira winning the fight. I thought that if I were to score the fight as a whole, Ankalaev definitely won that. And the reason why I say that is because even though Alex Pereira demonstrated perfect takedown defense, he basically got smudged against the cage like Jose Aldo does. And he was also kind of getting outboxed by Ankalaev at times. We saw Ankalaev hurt Alex pretty badly in the second round. And it kind of makes me wonder if age is starting to catch up with him, because he didn't look as fluid or as slick as he did in his previous fights. Or at least that's what I thought. Now, Alex Pereira, he's 37. I think he might be turning 38 this year. Who knows? But he is kind of up there as a fighter. But still, we can't take away from Ankalaev's victory. It's not really it's a victory. I would say that Ankalaev won the fight as a whole, but still, it wasn't a truly impressive fight or an impressive performance from either of these guys. And I know they're going to book the rematch, but I'm not really looking forward to it, because this fight was kind of boring. And that's my final thought about it. It was a pretty dull fight besides round 2, where Ankalaev hurt him, and that was the only real excitement that I got out of this fight. Yeah. Now, moving on to Gaethje versus Fiziev. Please, UFC, Dana White, Hunter, Sean Shelby, whoever does the matchmaking, please do not give Justin Gaethje a title shot. Yes, he dropped Fiziev, who's number 11, in round 2 with an uppercut, and he won a decision that I think could have gone either way, depending upon how you score round 3. But I would say it's still fine to give it to Gaethje in this case. He looked like Justin Gaethje. He looked normal, all right on the feet. Typical post-Eddie Alvarez Justin Gaethje, patient Gaethje. But please don't give this man a title shot against Islam Makhachev. I know that Ali Abdelaziz, he manages both Gaethje and Islam Makhachev, so Ali is going to be clamoring to get that fight done. But Gaethje does not deserve a title shot, and if the UFC gives him a title shot, just like how they gave Poirier a title shot after KOing Benoit Saint-Denis after just getting one single win, I mean, it would just make the UFC look even more like a joke with that. And now, as for Fiziev, I'm sorry to say this, but it looks like it's pretty much over for Fiziev. He's on a 3-fight loss streak, and he probably needs to fight significantly down, maybe against a Nasrat Haqparast or Ludovic Klein. However, I have to say, he did demonstrate some very good grappling in the first round. He had this inverted triangle, and he was landing ground and pound to Gaethje's body, which I thought was really, really good, and I didn't know that was going to be a part of his game. But still, he got dropped, he got hurt, and he's going to need to fight significantly down in the rankings. Now, moving on to the feature fight of this card, Ignacio Bahamondes submitted Jalen Turner via triangle choke from bottom. And I was just laughing my ass off when I saw this, because who the hell gets submissions from full guard in 2025? Now, first, for those of you who don't know, I have these UFC fight card watch-along parties in my channel's Discord, so you can watch fights with me or with other Aniki MMA YouTube fan people in the Discord. And when I was watching this card with everybody in there, I said that Ignacio Bahamondes was probably going to be the first guy to grapple, okay, in this fight. And it turns out I was correct. But what Ignacio Bahamondes did was he pulled half guard in 2025. And it wasn't like, rolling for a leg lock half guard, right? It was like half guard, okay? And, well, Ignacio Bahamondes apparently made the correct decision because he submitted Jalen Turner with jiu-jitsu you learn as a white belt, right? he learned, he did that. It was just a basic triangle that you set up by, kicking off your opponent's hips and then throwing your hips around their body, their neck, and just choking the guy out like that. And personally, I think this win was, it was more so Jalen Turner screwing up and being a total novice on the ground than it was Ignacio Bahamondes being a wizard on the ground or anything like that. But still, it was a good win. It was a decent win. But personally, I don't think Ignacio Bahamondes makes it much further up the lightweight division than this, because everybody else above him is going to have much better grappling than Jalen Turner. But personally, I think that Ignacio Bahamondes, he should probably fight Joel Alvarez, maybe, who's another 6'3" lightweight, or the loser of Paddy versus Chandler, or MMA Guru put out this tweet, Mauricio Ruffy versus Ignacio Bahamondes. That would be a pretty good fight as well. Now, Jalen Turner cut this low IQ range merchant immediately. And the reason why I say this is because this guy is out here getting submitted from full guard in 2025. I can't even. It's just how, right? Anybody with basic jiu-jitsu knowledge knows you don't stick one arm in and one arm out. It's always both arms into the full guard or both arms out. And Jalen Turner can't even stick to those sorts of core, basic, fundamental principles in jiu-jitsu. So, cut him. He's obviously not UFC level. He's getting submitted by another striker from guard. Okay? He's 1-4 in his last 5 fights. And he's probably pound for pound the lowest IQ fighter in the UFC. Okay? And another thing, Daniel Cormier and Joe Rogan were talking about this, but apparently the loss to Renato Moicano really messed with his mental, and it made him really depressed for quite a while, or something like that. They were talking about it during Jalen Turner's walkout, right? And I get it. Losing to Moicano in the way that he did, that must have been pretty mentally tough. But you gotta be mentally tough to be a fighter, so if you can't handle that sort of thing, and if it ends up screwing with your performance, like it probably did in this fight here, you're just showing that you're not UFC caliber, or at least not ranked caliber. And he's probably going to be removed from the rankings, and he's 1-4 in his last 5 fights, with his one win being over Bobby Green. We'll get to Bobbert Green later. But he's just not a very mentally tough fighter. I don't rate him. I've always thought of him as a range merchant. And, cut him. And now, moving on to the next fight, we have Amanda Lemos versus Yasmin Lucindo. This was a fight. It was on the main card. It was on the pay-per-view portion of this card. I think Lemos won, but I was also in the bathroom at that point. So, moving on to the next fight, we had Mauricio Ruffy knocking out Bobbert Green, in the first round with a spinning wheel kick. Wow. Mauricio Ruffy produces the greatest spinning wheel kick KO since Edson Barboza versus Terry Edim. Honestly, it was as good as that, if not better. Okay? It was just so fantastic and so beautiful, and I'm just going to be playing a crowd view clip of it here so that I don't get copyrighted, but I still wanted to show it because this was just such a good knockout. Man. And Mauricio Ruffy, he took no damage in this fight. He should totally 100% consider taking a fight on UFC 314 so he can fight along with Carlos Prates and John Silva. Okay? Imagine if we had Mauricio Ruffy then Carlos Prates, and then John Silva on the main card of a pay-per-view one after another. Because apparently the UFC 314 main card, they're making John Silva versus Bryce Mitchell as the feature fight. And right below that is going to be Carlos Prates versus Geoff Neal. So I was just thinking, if we added Mauricio Ruffi below them as the main card opener, that would be so cool, right? But if he doesn't do a quick turnaround, if Mauricio Ruffi doesn't do a quick turnaround, he should be allowed to fight any ranked lightweight who isn't top 5, excluding Gamrot and also excluding Max Holloway, because I know Max Holloway is ranked at number 9. But yeah, Mauricio Ruffi, the hype is real. The hype is real. Personally, I don't think Mauricio Ruffi has what it takes to be a champion, or at least I'm not sure of it yet, because we don't know how he does against top-tier wrestlers like Arman Tsarukyan and Mateusz Gamrot. But for right now, let's just enjoy the hype. Let's just enjoy the fighting nerds. Now, moving on to Bobbert King Green.
I am the king!
Any man who must say, I am the king, is no true king.
Bobby Green, Bobbert Green, Robert Green, Bimbo Baggins Bob. He should just retire or go to the GFL, because his chin has been declining for a while now. He got dropped by the ghost of Tony Ferguson. He got dropped by Jim Miller. He took so much damage against Jalen Turner in his loss to, in his loss there. And honestly, I think Bobby Green, Robert Green, whatever you want to call him, Bimbo, Bobby, Ba, whatever, anything besides King, I honestly think he loses to mid-level lightweights at this point. Which is to say, I think he loses to Tom Nolan, Elvis Brenner, guys around that level at this point. And that's just because he's been declining, and his style where he keeps his hands very, very low, that's quite reliant on reflexes, on head movement, on speed, and also on having a decently durable chin. And Bobby Green just doesn't have those anymore. He's 38 at lightweight, and I think his days of being a gatekeeper are probably past him at this point. Now, moving on to the fight that I'm now going to probably get a bunch of guys clowning me in the comment sections for. It's Ray Turia versus Joshua Van, and of course I picked Ray Turia, but I picked him mostly based upon bias and in-group preference. It was an underdog pick, of course, but Joshua Van demonstrated impeccable takedown defense. We all have to admit that. Van basically won the fight by defending takedowns. Van didn't have to do any crazy striking either because Ray wasn't throwing back. And the only time Van was taken down was when Ray was mixing in throws from the clinch. Every single leg and double leg, I think with the exception of maybe one or two, Van stuffed. So he was just solid there, okay? He hurt Ray badly to the body with a front kick in round 3. Although it was kind of a low blow. I think it was like 90% of the kick hit the gut and then like maybe 10% hit the cup. But Van was fantastic, right? Personally, I think that he should be fighting Almabayev next if I were to give him an opponent. Now, moving on to Ray. Another undefeated prospect loses. And, he had these great technical single and double leg attempts. But he was just shooting out in the open. There was no setup with the hands. He barely threw any punches. I think his strikes were in the single digits for most of the fight. Ray, he just needs to go to Thailand for 2 years and forget. Or even like take in a boxing gym, like a boxing gym in Japan, right? He just needs to go and train there. He still is definitely a prospect, but he's going to take a while to get any better than he is. And these are the Twitter comments from Kai Asakura's wrestling coach, Billy Bigelow. And you can read the tweets here. We need to implement better systems into MMA training. It is not enough to be a good striker, wrestler, or grappler. Victories come from the transitions and blending of MMA skills. Japan needs to evolve. Let's work together. Tsuruya is having a tough time with his wrestling transitions. He needs to disguise his takedowns with punches. Van looks strong. So yeah, we all know that Rei Tsuruya basically got completely dominated. And here's Japanese Twitter's reaction to watching Rei Tsuruya lose. Here's one tweet saying, Kai no hou ga tsuyoso, which means Kai Asakura is probably better. There's a tweet saying, oh, there's such a gap, and how he wasn't able to do anything was shocking. He's still young, so he has chances. I hope he works hard so he won't get released. We can only count on Tatsuro Taira. There was a lot of booing, and he also faked a low blow. Big mouths aren't strong. And of course, Joshua Van was really good. And the reason why they're talking about Rei Tsuruya versus Kai Asakura, it's not just because, Japanese fans know Japanese fighters. It's also because Rei Tsuruya was talking about how he was better than Kai Asakura, or how he was going to get the belt for Japan at flyweight. So he's getting clowned by everybody for saying that. Okay, he's getting a little bit of critical feedback here from the Japanese fan base. And finally, I wanted to end this video off by talking about the horrible robbery on the prelims. Myron Santos, who was the tough winner who KO'd Khan Offley, he fought Francis Marshall. Myron Santos was a heavy favorite, but Marshall dropped Santos in the first round, took Santos's back in the second round, and took him down in the third round. And the striking was relatively even besides the knockdown that Francis Marshall got in the first round. And the fight was scored 30-27 Francis Marshall, 29-28 times 2 for Myron Santos. And everybody is basically saying this was a pretty horrible decision. And that is everybody besides the piggy in a beanie. Here he is saying, no robbery. These are the strike totals by round for Santos versus Marshall. Red is Santos and blue is Marshall and yada yada yada. And I just wanted to make this clear, but if you haven't realized at this point, Guru really just likes giving contrarian takes. As you can see from the O'Malley was robbed by Marab video, of course, there. And also from his crash out after watching Magomed Ankalaev get the decision victory over Alex Mejia. Now, as I said earlier, I think there's an argument for Alex Mejia winning that fight against Magomed Ankalaev. But if you're gonna say that Myron Santos versus Francis Marshall wasn't a robbery, how can you be in good faith saying that Alex Mejia won rounds 1, 3, and 5 against Ankalaev? Okay, there's a better argument for a much better argument for Francis Marshall 3-0 than there is for Alex Mejia 3-2. I'll just leave it at that. And I guess I'll just end the video with this because it ties everything in a nice neat knot. But when it comes to MMA scoring, most of the time, you know which guys are going to score which fights in which ways, based upon their own sort of biases, based upon their own personal interests. So, yeah, that's very, very evident with Guru in this case, and very, very evident in the crash out that he had. So yeah, that's the end of the video. Like, share, and subscribe if you want to. Goodbye.